Hi everyone, I'm Anulika Nnadi, and today I'm going to be presenting my project, which is evaluating the representation of marginalized communities in Boston media, a natural language processing and machine learning approach. First off, I'd like to thank my advisor, Langdon White, in the back, and I'd also like to know how this project was a collaboration between BU Spark, the NAACP, and WGBH Boston. So to begin, I'd like to play a little activity where we see two different celebrities were described by media after making the news. So we're going to analyze Richard Sherman, ex-NFL player, and Justin Bieber, international pop star. I also wanted to put the complexions of both so we can understand the race and the complexions of the two celebrities. So Richard Sherman was called a thug after he spoke in an aggressive manner after making the play of his life and sending his team to the Super Bowl. Whereas Justin Bieber was called a misguided young man after he allegedly vandalized his neighbor's house, arrested for DUI, drag racing, and resisting arrest, and he was also charged with assaulting a limo driver in Toronto. So something doesn't seem right here. I think we need to dive into the word thug a little bit more to get more context. So, according to Oxford Dictionary, a thug is a violent, aggressive person who is a criminal. And a criminal, also according to Oxford Dictionary, is a person who has committed a crime. So let's take a second and think about some crimes. We have vandalism, driving under the influence, drag racing, resisting arrest, and assault. Can we take a moment and think about anyone in the world who has committed these crimes before? Take your time. Please don't incriminate yourself. You guessed it, America and Canada's favorite misguided young man. So as you can see, this is an example of biased media coverage because based on this activity, we know technically, based on the technicalities of the definition, Justin Bieber is the actual thug in this case. So whereas Richard Sherman, he was just speaking and he was called a thug in an unfair manner. And I do want to highlight how the word thug is historically and disproportionately assigned to Black individuals, especially Black men and Black boys, in media narratives, which perpetuates harmful stereotypes. So that brings us to my project, where I'm essentially seeing if Boston media, like WGBH Boston, is discussing white communities different from non-white and marginalized communities. So instead of focusing on the individual level, I focus more on the community and neighborhood level. So for example, let's say we take West Roxbury and Roxbury. For those who don't know, Roxbury has more of a Black and Latinx community, whereas West Roxbury has more of a white community. So essentially what we're trying to see is that if there are articles based in Roxbury, are they talking about Black individuals? If they are they talking about crime or any other problematic topics? But let's say we're in West Roxbury, are they talking about white individuals? If they are they talking about more positive, neutral topics like gardening, sports, or awards? So I essentially aim to answer this question by developing a methodology to analyze WGBH Boston articles for bias and representation using machine learning and natural language processing technologies. So essentially, machine learning is enabling the computer to be able to predict and make decisions and predict on its own without human intervention, while natural language processing is allowing the computer to be able to understand human language and the emotion and sentiment behind it. So essentially using both is teaching a computer to be able to read and understand the article and the emotion behind the article, and judge the fairness and the bias associated with that article. So as we know, rhetoric like thug and other words of that nature is problematic as they can perpetuate stereotypes and bias and also affect societal perception. And as we can see in our country's past, especially when we're talking about immigration and immigration policy, there is a characteristic or a label attached specifically for Mexican immigrants, how they are criminals, rapists, drug dealers, which is not the case at all. And we've also seen in the past how when May 2020, when Black people were peacefully protesting, they were labeled as Black rioters, whereas so when white people were actually rioting on January 6th, they were called protesters. So you may ask, okay, how do you even get started with this project? So it took a lot of data. So I essentially had 10,000 articles, and I had to label those articles. So labeling essentially means tagging the location of the article, what race was discussed in the article, and rating the positivity or negativity attached with the article. So essentially, to automate this process, because I cannot read 10,000 articles, to automate this process, I invited students and faculty to 2 different events. So the first event, I called it my article night, where I gave students and faculty empanadas in exchange for reading an article. And then I also had an event at Cookie O'Clock, where students and faculty were able to get a free cookie to read articles. So I'd also like to say, please do not underestimate the power of free food. So with that, I was able to get 200 labeled articles. So for the data I considered with the labeled articles was seeing if race is being discussed, if it is being discussed, what race is being discussed, and there are 6 buckets, white, Asian, black, multiple races, non-white, which is essentially people of color or communities of color, and then white. And also analyzing the topic or topics of the article and the article sentiment. So with the data I considered, I was able to lead to my findings, which are unfortunately still in progress because of the lack of labeled data I had, it caused an inconsistency with my results and accuracy. So as you can see here, in the first image, you see the text and the 2 algorithms that I have programmed. So essentially, with the logistical regression and the XGBoost, they are predicting to see if the text Barack Obama is black is talking about race. And as you can see, they both output 1, which means true. So they're saying true, this text, Barack Obama is black, is talking about race. But if you can see as the second picture, the logistical regression says 0, which means false, which is not what we want. We wanted to also output 1. So that leads us into my future findings, and that's hopefully to get more labeled data and to be able to integrate my algorithms with a public web interface, as you can see with these pictures right here that are currently in development. And with this public web application, it essentially will be available for journalists to be able to upload their own articles and test it for bias and fairness. And with this, I hope this helps media businesses be able to self-evaluate and hopefully lead to inclusive and equitable news coverage and bring awareness to bias and transparency. And I'd also like to say thank you again to my advisor, Michelle, BU Spark, the NAACP, and WGBH Boston for allowing me to be a part of this project.
Any questions?
Thank you, Anulika, for this talk. One thing that strikes me about your research is like how much collaboration has gone into it, both with like this list of organizations you've worked with, but also all the people you had to get to like label your articles. Can you tell us some of what you learned about like how to do collaborative research or like things you've taken away from what I imagine is sometimes kind of a difficult way to do research?
Yeah, no, of course. So one thing I did learn is that you do need to incentivize people a lot of the time, especially if you're working with college students. Food is the best way to do that. But yeah, it's mostly just a lot of meetings too, and just making sure like everyone's updated and making sure that you're communicating like, your progress and such. So it's really just a lot of like collaboration essentially, and just trying to like communicate with people, making sure people are fed so they're happy. But yeah.
Any other questions?
So because you crowdsourced the labeling of these articles, did you ever run into a problem where someone mislabeled or misinterpreted what exactly they were meant to do because it was people that, or ostensibly people that weren't part of the project coming in to help?
Yeah, so essentially with that, I did have a lot of issues where people would, so one of the issues that I came upon with people not really understanding race versus ethnicity, and a lot of the time I'd have to talk to the person, like, because I'd get a live feedback based off the Google form I created for the survey, and then I go to the person like, oh, instead of doing their ethnicity, can you label like, okay, what race is that? So it's more so like making sure like going back to them and communicating with them exactly what I'm looking for, because also it's not really, it can be kind of confusing as well. So I just made sure to talk to the individuals who were reading my articles essentially.
to back off of that, would you ever edit the algorithm to have ethnicity involved and broaden the range of populations that are used?
Hopefully, eventually, if that's the case. So essentially, what I did for the algorithm, I used the census. So, or I'm trying to make my buckets based off the census, essentially. So, like, let's say it's like Haitian American. In that case, you would just do black. Or if it's like British American, you just do white in that sense. So hopefully, I can eventually train the program to like, okay, if someone says ethnicity, you can then just target it down to what race specifically. So yeah, that's something else for the future.
Great.
Anulika, thank you. It's wonderful to see where this project has gone, just in the 1 year that you worked on it. My question is really building off of the previous two, the first two questions. I know you say this is still an ongoing project. You do want to end up in a place where you can give policy recommendations. It can be a portal that journalists can use, et cetera, to kind of proofread, check their biases, et cetera. But I was wondering if, just given what you've done so far, if you also are thinking about ways to just put the insights you have from trying to do what you've done, right? Which is, how do you categorize bias in media reporting? How do you, you did have to turn to collaborative research too, which a lot of researchers don't, not typically with, social science and humanities kind of topics. It's, you don't really do that all the time. So I was wondering if you were just thinking of ways to maybe collate what you already have and find a place to make that available.
No, yeah, so I do plan on making a report based off of what I've done so far, and I do plan on making my code publicly available as well by the time I graduate.
All right, let's give a round of applause.